An Unexpected Blessing by Chapman. Chapter 1. Shipshewana, Indiana, February 13th. Etta Bontrager paid little attention to the north wind that howled and rocked their buggy. Her husband, Mose, peered out the front window, his weathered hands firmly gripping the reins to their horse. Mose was nearly 6 feet tall and still had the muscled form of the young man she had married 24 years earlier. In her mind, he was still that man in every way. As they passed near a streetlight, Mose raised his hat and reset it on his head, giving her a glimpse of his dark curly hair and receding hairline. They had both aged, to be sure. Nevertheless, in their hearts, she felt certain they were the same young man and woman setting out on a life together. Etta looked past Mose to the scene outside the window. Snow swirled around them, accumulating on the side of the road in 3-foot drifts. Beyond the snow was darkness. Little of the northern Indiana countryside was visible. It was as if the rest of the world had virtually disappeared under the weight of the winter storm. She had kept an eye on the weather all afternoon as an ominous feeling of heaviness in her belly and lower back warned her that her time was near. She'd watched as the snow covered the top of the barn, the maple trees, and the hillside. The east side of the house, where they planted their family garden, had disappeared under the white blanket. The trampoline, which her children had become too old to play on, disappeared under a small white mountain. Their front porch looked like something out of an English postcard. As they rode toward Shipshewana, the temperature held steady at a numbing 24 degrees. Etta was quite aware of the conditions outside their buggy this cold February evening, but she was more concerned about what was happening inside her body. Pushing the blanket down and off her lap, she swiped at the sweat running down her face in rivulets. She tried to focus on her breathing. She resisted the fear that insisted on clawing its way up her throat. She pushed away the memory of that other night 9 years ago. Closing her eyes, she imagined the child in her womb, the babe she would soon hold, the babe she had thought was a mistake. Now she knew it was no mistake. God had intended this child for their lives, for her and Mose. He had sent them an unexpected blessing in their later years. She did not believe this child was meant to replace Sarah. One child could never take the place of another. But God had seen fit to bless them one more time, and He would see them through. No storm was too big, no night too dark. The pain washed over her, and she again began to count, panting and praying it would pass quickly. Longer contractions meant the time for their babe's birth was closer, and they weren't yet ready. Not here, not in the middle of the country road. Mose reached over and clutched her hand. When she opened her eyes, she saw the worry etched on his face. "The storm is bad, yeah?" "We'll get through," he said. "I'm glad you woke the girls and reminded them to keep feeding wood into the big stove in the living room." "They're good girls. They'll take turns and handle it just fine. Not that any of them would go back to sleep. They were too excited about the arrival of their new Schwester." "Maybe I should have stayed home." "Nein. Doc said you needed to be at the birthing center." Etta peered out the front window. They had no lights on the front of their buggy, and the street lights revealed little. Snow falling, snow swirling, snow covering everything in its path. The road itself was completely obscured. Etta had no idea how Mose managed to keep them moving in the right direction. Rather than fret over the weather, which she couldn't control, she prayed for the babe about to be born. She whispered a silent prayer for Sarah, who was now in heaven, and another for David, her lost child. This was how she thought of him now, not gone or vanished, but lost. Finally, she prayed for their farm, that Mose might find a way to make the bank payments. She petitioned God for help so they wouldn't need to sell the home where they had raised all of their children. Each prayer brought heartache. The ache in her heart over Sarah was steady, constant, familiar. The sorrow over David was fresh, even after 2 years. Was he safe, sheltered, and warm? When would she see him again? As for their farm, it didn't seem possible that they might lose it. Her thoughts could hardly wrap around that fear. The questions swirled and collided in her mind, and then her attention was jerked back to the present as the buggy tilted precariously and came to an abrupt stop. Their 10-year-old gelding, Morgan, struggled with the weight of the buggy against the heavy, wet snow. But the drift he'd stepped into was too deep. The buggy was stuck. The light from down the street shone into their window, and for a split second she saw fear bleach the color from her husband's face. Then Mose turned to her and patted her hand. "I have a shovel and lantern in the back. I'll dig him out." Etta nodded, unable to respond. The next contraction was coming. They were closer together now, barely allowing time to rest in between. It was all she could do to focus on her breathing and continue to pray that this child would wait before entering the world. Those thoughts all fell away as once again her body was flooded with pain. She placed both of her hands on her belly, took another breath, forced back the panic, and whispered another prayer. The contraction subsided, and she glanced to her left. Mose was gone. He must have stepped out into the storm. The buggy wasn't moving. Why? Then she remembered the snowdrift and the sudden stop, his promise to dig out the horse. If there was a way through this storm, Mose would find it. If not, they'd have the baby here, in the buggy. It wasn't the welcome she'd envisioned for her change-of-life baby, but then often their lives did not follow the path she envisioned. Like most people, their married life had taken twists and turns she would never have imagined when she was a young woman about to wed. Another contraction came, consuming her attention with her energy. When it passed, she willed her body to relax, huddled beneath the blanket, and trusted that Mose would be safe as he continued to dig a path around the gelding. Etta could see him now, occasionally, as he passed in front of the light from the lantern. He was a shadow moving back and forth, side to side through the blizzard. She fought to keep her eyes open for a minute, then 2, and finally she relented. As she rested, her mind traveled back and landed on the day she'd first shared their news.